I think it's interesting to talk about a little bit of the human story of the Nobel Prize,
Sure.
which is, I mean,
It's fascinating,
it's a
actually.
really, well, first of all, the prize itself. It's kind of fascinating on the psychological level that prizes, I know we kind of think that prizes don't matter, but somehow they kind of focus the mind about
Yeah,
some of the most special things we've
they do.
accomplished.
It's the recognition, the funding,
Yeah. But and also
sure.
inspiration for new. I mean, like I said, when I was a little kid, thinking
Yeah,
about the Nobel Prize, like I didn't, it inspires millions of
sure.
young scientists. At the same time, there's a sadness to it a little bit that, especially in the field, like depending on the field, but experimental fields that involve teams of, I don't know, sometimes hundreds. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
of brilliant people. The Nobel Prize is only given to just a handful.
That's right.
Is it max at three?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not even written in Alfred Nobel's will, it turns out. One of our teammates looked into it in a museum in Stockholm when we went there for Nobel Week in 2011. The leaders who got the prize formally knew that without the rest of us working hard in the
Yeah.
trenches, the result would not have, been discovered. So they invited us to participate in Nobel Week. And so one of the team members looked in the will and it's not there. It's just tradition.
That's
But it's
interesting.
archaic. That's the way science used to be done. And
Yeah.
it's not the way a lot of science is done now. And you look at gravitational wave discovery, which was, recognized with the Nobel Prize in 2017. Ray Weiss at MIT got it, and
Hmm.
Kip Thorne and Barry Barish at Caltech. And Ron Drever, one of the masterminds, had passed away earlier in the year. So again, one of the rules of the Nobel is that it's not given posthumously,
Yeah.
or at least the one exception might be if they've made their decision and they're busy making their press releases right before October, the first week in October or whatever, and then the person passes away. I think they don't change their minds then. But
Hmm.
yeah, it doesn't square with today's reality that a lot of science is done by big teams. In that case, a team of 1,000 people. In our case, it was two teams consisting of about 50 people.
Hmm.
And we used techniques that were arguably developed in part by people astrophysicists who weren't even on those two papers. I mean, some
Hmm.
of them were, but other papers were written by other people, and so it's like we're standing on the shoulders of giants. And none of those people was officially recognized.
Yeah.
And to me, it was okay. Again, it was the thrill of doing the work, and ultimately the work, the discovery was recognized with the prize. And, we got to participate in Nobel Week. And, it's okay with me. I've known other physicists whose lives were ruined because they did not get the Nobel Prize and they felt strongly that they should have.
So it
Ralph
doesn't.
Alpher of the Alpha Beta Gamma, paper predicting the microwave background radiation, he should have gotten it. His advisor Gamow was dead by that point, but Penzias and Wilson got it for the discovery, and Alpher, apparently from colleagues who knew him well, I've talked to them, his life was ruined by this. It just gnawed at his innards so much.
It's very possible that in a small handful of people, even three, that you would be one of the winners of the Nobel Prize. That doesn't weigh heavy on you.
Well, there were the two team leaders, Saul Perlmutter and Brian Schmidt, and
And then
usually it's the
there's,
team leaders that are recognized. And then Adam Rees was my postdoc.
yeah,
He was,
first author, I
yeah,
guess.
first author. I was second author of that
Yeah,
paper.
yeah,
Yeah. So I was his direct mentor at the time, although he was, one of these people who just, runs with things. He was an
yeah,
MIT
yeah,
undergraduate, by the
yeah,
way,
yeah.
Harvard graduate student, and then a postdoc as a so-called Miller Fellow for basic research in science at Berkeley, something that I was back in 84 to 86. But you're largely a free agent, but he worked quite closely with
Yeah.
me, and he came to Berkeley to work with me. And on Schmidt's team, he was charged with analyzing the data, and he measured the brightnesses of these distant supernovae, showing that they're fainter and thus more distant than anticipated. And that led to this conclusion that the universe had to have accelerated in order to push them out to such great
Yeah.
distances. And I was shocked when he showed me the data, the results of his calculations and measurements.
But it's very,
So he deserved it. And on Saul's team,
wow.
Gerson Goldhaber deserved it, but he died, I think, a year earlier in 2010. But that would have been four. And so And me, well, I was on both teams, but was I number 4, 5, 6, 7? I don't know.
Well, it's also very so.
You
If I
know,
were to, it's possible that you're. I mean, I could make a very good case for you're in the three, and does that
you're
cycle?
kind,
But
so
is that psychologically? I mean, listen, it weighs on me a little bit because
yeah.
I I don't know what to do with that. Perhaps it should motivate the rethinking. Like Time Magazine started doing like Person of the Year, and like
Yeah.
they would start doing like concepts and almost like the black hole
Right.
gets the Nobel Prize, or
Yeah,
or
yeah,
the
yeah.
accelerated universe gets the Nobel Prize, and here's the list of people. So like or like the Oscar that you could say
Yeah.
because
It's a team effort now,
it's a team.
and
It's
it
a
should
team.
be redone. And the Breakthrough Prize in Fundamental Physics, which was started by Yuri Milner, and Zuckerberg is involved, and others as well,
They
Yuri
recognize
Milner.
the larger team.
Yeah, they recognize teams. And so, in fact, both teams in the accelerating universe were recognized with the Breakthrough Prize in 2015. Nevertheless, the same three people, Reese, Perlmutter, and Schmidt, got the red carpet rolled out for them and were at the big ceremony and shared half of the prize money.
Hmm.
And the rest of us, roughly 50,
Yeah.
shared the other half and didn't get to go to the ceremony. So, but I feel for them. I mean, for the gravitational waves, it was 1,000 people. What are they going to do? Invite everyone?
Yeah.
For the Higgs particle, it was 6
Oh,
to
yeah.
8,000 physicists and engineers. In fact, because of the whole issue of who gets it, experimentally, that discovery still has not been recognized, right? The theoretical work by Peter Higgs and Engler got recognized, but there was a troika of other people who perhaps wrote the most complete paper, and they were left out. And another guy died, and
Yeah, it's hard. It's all of it's heartbreaking. Some people argue that the Nobel Prize has been diluted too, because if you look at Roger Penrose, you can make an argument that he should get the prize by himself. Like so separate those. Like
could have and should have. Perhaps he should have perhaps gotten it with Hawking before Hawking's death.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The problem was Hawking radiation had not been detected, but you could argue that Hawking made enough other fundamental contributions to the theoretical study of black holes, and the observed data were already good enough at the time of before Hawking's death. Okay. I mean, the latest results by Reinhard Genzel's group is that they see the time dilation effect of a star that's passing very close to the black hole in the middle of our galaxy. That's cool, and it adds additional evidence, but hardly anyone doubted the existence of the supermassive black hole. And Andrea Gez's group, I believe, hadn't yet shown that relativistic effect, and yet she got part of the prize as well. So clearly it was given for the original evidence that was really good. And that evidence is at least a decade old, So one could make the case for Hawking. One could make the case that in 2016, when Mayor and Queloz won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of the first exoplanet, 51b Pegasi, well, there was a fellow at Penn State, Alex Wolszan, who in 1992, 3 years preceding 1995, found a planet orbiting a pulsar, a very weird kind of star, a neutron star, and that wouldn't have been a normal planet, sure. And so the Nobel Committee, they gave it for the discovery of planets around normal sun-like stars, but hell, Wolszan found a planet, so they could have given it to him as the third person instead of to Jim Peebles for the development of what's called physical cosmology. He's at Princeton, he deserved it, but they could have given Nobel for the development of physical cosmology to Peebles, and I would claim some other people were pretty important in that development as well, and they could have given it some other year. So there's a lot of controversy. I try not to dwell on it. Was I number 3? Probably not. Adam Rees did the work. I helped bounce ideas off of him, but we wouldn't have had the result without him.
Yeah.
And I was on both teams for reasons. I mean, the style of the first team, the Supernova Cosmology Project, didn't match mine. They came largely from experimental high energy particle physics, where there's these hierarchical teams and stuff, and it's hard for the little guy to have a say. At least that's what I kind of thought. Whereas the team of astronomers led by Brian Schmidt was, first of all, a bunch of my friends, and They grew up as astronomers making contributions on little teams, and we decided to band together, but all of us had our voices heard. So it was sort of a culture, a style that I preferred, really. Yeah. But let me tell you a story. At the Nobel banquet, okay, I'm sitting there between two physicists who are members of the committee of the Swedish National Academy of Sciences. And I strategically kept, offering them wine and stuff during this long, drawn out Nobel ceremony, right? And I got them to be pretty talkative. And then in a polite, diplomatic way, I started asking them pointed questions. And basically they admitted that if there are 4 or more people equally deserving, they wait for one of them to die. Or they just don't give the prize at all when it's unclear who the 3 are, at least unclear to them. But unclear to them, they're not even right part of the time. Right. I mean, Jocelyn Bell discovered pulsars with a radio antenna, a set of radio antennas that her advisor, Anthony Hewish, conceived and built. So he deserves some credit. But he didn't discover the pulsar. She did. And his initial reaction to the data that she showed him was a condescending rubbish, my dear. Yeah, I'm not kidding. Now, I know Jocelyn Bell, and she did not let this destroy her life. Yeah. She won every other prize under the sun, okay? Vera Rubin, arguably one of the discoverers of dark matter, although if you look at the history, there were a number of people, and that was the issue, I think. There were a number of people, 4 or more, who had similar data and similar ideas at about the same time. Rubin won every prize under the sun. The new big, large-scale survey telescope being built in Chile is being renamed the Vera Rubin telescope because she passed away in December of 2015, I think. It'll conduct this survey, large-scale survey, with the Rubin telescope. So she's been recognized, but never with the Nobel Prize. And I would say that, to her credit, she did not let that consume her life either. And perhaps it was a bit easier because there had been no Nobel given for the discovery of dark matter. Whereas in the case of pulsars and Jocelyn Bell, there was a prize given for the discovery of the freaking pulsars. Yeah. And she didn't get it. What a travesty of justice.
So I also think, as a fan of fiction, as a fan of stories, that the travesty and the tragedy and the unfairness and the tension of it is what makes the prize and similar prizes beautiful. The decisions of other humans that result in dreams being broken, and that's why we love the Olympics. As so many, athletes give their whole life for this particular moment. Yeah, and then there's referee decisions and like little slips of here and there, like the little misfortunes that destroy entire dreams. And it's weird to say, but it feels like that makes the entirety of it even more special.
Yeah.
Like, if it was perfect, it wouldn't be interesting.
Well, humans like competition and they like heroes. And unfortunately, it gives the impression to youngsters today that science is still done by white men with gray beards wearing white lab coats. And I'm very pleased to see that this year, Andrea Ghez, the 4th woman in the history of the physics prize to have received it. And then 2 women, one at Berkeley, one elsewhere, won the Nobel Prize in chemistry without any male co-recipient. And so that's sending a message, I think, to girls that they can do science and they have role models. I think the Breakthrough Prize and other such prizes show that teams get recognized as well. And if you pay attention to the newspapers, most of the good authors like, Dennis Overbye of the New York Times and others said that these were teams of people, and they emphasized that. And they all played a role. And maybe if some grad student hadn't soldered some circuit, maybe the whole thing wouldn't have worked, But still, Ray Weiss, Kip Thorne was the theoretical, impetus for the whole search for gravitational waves. Barry Barish brought the MIT and Caltech teams together to get them to cooperate at a time when the project was nearly dead, from what I understand. Mm-hmm. And contributed greatly to the experimental setup as well. He's a great experimental physicist, but he was really good at bringing these two teams together instead of having them duke it out in blows and leaving both of them bleeding and dying. The National Science Foundation was going to cut the funding, from what I understand. So there's human drama involved in this whole thing. And the Olympics, a runner or a swimmer, runner, they slip just at the moment that they were taking off from the first thing, and that costs them some fraction of a second, and that's it. They didn't win, And
in that case, I mean, the coaches, the families, which I've met a lot of Olympic athletes, and the coaches and the families of the athletes are really the winners of the medals. Yeah. I mean, but they don't get the medal. It's credit assignment is a fascinating thing. I mean, that's the full human story. We have outside of prizes, it's fascinating. I mean, just to be in the middle of it for artificial intelligence, there's a field of deep learning that's really exciting, and people have been. There's yet another award, the Turing Award, given for deep learning to three folks who are very much responsible for the field, but so are a lot of others. And
that's right.
And there's a few. there's a fellow by the name of Schmidt-Huber who so he sort of symbolizes the forgotten folks in the deep learning community. But that's the unfortunate, sad thing. We remember Isaac Newton. We remember these special figures, and the ones that flew close to them, we forget.
Well, that's right. And, often the breakthroughs were made based on the body of knowledge that had been assimilated prior to that. But, again, people like to worship heroes. You mentioned the Oscars earlier, and, you look at the directors and stuff sometimes get awards and stuff. But, you look at even something like, I don't know, songwriters, musicians, Elton John or something, right? Bernie Taupin, right? Wrote many of the words, or he's not as well known, or the Beatles or something like that.
I was heartbroken to learn that Elvis didn't write most of his songs.
Elvis, that's right. There you go. But he was the king, right? And he had such a personality, and it was such a performer, right? But it's the unsung heroes in many cases. Yeah.